Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the Nigeria Azure Community Group. The live study today is for the Azure Administrator session. So, thanks very much for taking time to join us. So, just a quick reminder to everyone that if you are yet to join our different social media groups, whether it's a Meetup group, our Twitch channel, our YouTube channel, Twitter, LinkedIn, Telegram, please use the links that you're looking at on your screen to do so and to join the groups. I'm very happy to have you. So that way you can always keep up to date with all the apologies. Sorry. So just make sure that you join us on our YouTube channel and you'll be able to follow through. So, just a quick reminder of the agenda that we have. So, we have different events. So, today we have Satai Wokoka will be speaking to us on governance and compliance. So, really looking forward to that. That will be awesome. And we also have later today from 6 p.m. We have a DevOps fundamentals training that will be delivered by Rafael Gabmama on introduction to infrastructure as code. So that will be awesome to take time to join us also. And for next week, we have the identity continuation of the series, and we have DevOps tools overview next week also. So for today, we have Sataiwo that will be speaking to us on governance and compliance. So, Sataiwo, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you very, very much. I'm good. Thank you. How about you?
Yeah, doing good. Thanks very much. So many people may not know, but we did go to the same university together. You're one of these veterans in the industry. So we're glad that you're taking the time to share with us today. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think you'll be awesome.
Okay. Sure.
So
Not a
without
problem.
further ado, I'll go ahead and hand over to you, Sataiwo. So please feel free to just walk us through governance and compliance. I'm looking forward to learning a lot of awesome stuff today. So over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Oga David. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to the third session of the Azure Administrators Live Series. Today, we'll be talking about Azure governance and management, and I hope you're all excited to learn about it. A little bit about me. My name is Taiwo Koka. I'm a cloud engineer and I'm also a Microsoft trainer. I work predominantly with Azure resources, infrastructure, platform, software as a service, but I still do a little bit of AWS and some on-prem data stuff. So, so today we're talking about Azure governance and compliance. So before we get into what governance is and how we can implement it, let's start at some of the reasons why we need it. Most organizations don't actually treat Azure governance as priority thing till things go wrong. So let's start with the old method, the way we've been managing resources back. I'm talking about back in on-prem before cloud came. So an example here, let's say the development team, they're working on a project, they need a couple of resources to be built. What they have to do is simple. They have to raise a ticket to the server administrator. So the server administrator will build the server, the application administrator will install the application if they need database. The database administrators will build that, security team will check, and once that's done, it's handed over to the development team. And that has been working so far for a long time. But uh, we've always been sacrificing speed over control. Because if you look at all the steps I've just mentioned, that is a lot of task. And depending, if the development team raise a request, the SLA might be 5 days, 2 weeks, and development team will just have to wait. Because most times, if you look at it in most organizations, when development team, when they want something, they want it like right now. Like they don't want to waste any time. So, but now that we've got the cloud, the development team now, they technically don't need the server administrators anymore because they're like these guys are like a ton. They slow their process down. So with Azure Cloud now, everyone can spin up resources quickly. Next, click, finish. You've got all your resources. So it's amazing. You can just do all these things on the fly. So now you've got speed. You hear most organizations, oh, we want to be agile, want to speed things up. So it's cool, just building things on the fly, but it can be very, very dangerous if you don't have the right plan in place. Like I said, some organizations, they don't really put all these controls in place unless maybe, for example, they've got like a high bill, or they've got like a security breach, or they've got auditors coming, and when they look at the environment, they're like, oh god, this is not good. So I'll show you a couple of challenges within the cloud governance. So one of them is lack of visibility into the environment. Now, within Azure Cloud, how many your administrators are confident looking at the VM to say, oh, I know what that VM, all your VMs, you know what they do, who owns it, or is it production, is it dev? So like an auditor asking the Azure administrator, what is it that this server does? And you heard like the administrator say, oh, well, let me send an email to all application owners. Well, the truth is I don't know. So we've seen that. The other one is rising Azure cost. So let's say this month right now, you spent about £5,000. Next month you're getting £15,000, and next month you're getting £30,000. You're thinking, what are we selling, or what are we buying? How are we getting this much cost? So most organizations don't know where to look for that. Resources deployed into the wrong region. This has to do with, let's look at GDPR. So you have data which has to stay within, let's say, UK or Europe, and you've got someone who says, oh, you know what, I like the East US. Let me just create that storage account in there and put data in there. So that's another issue. If auditors find that, the organizations will get fined. Controlling which VMs users have access to. This one is kind of like a standard one where this way where you just give users access. Let's say a user needs access to one VM, and or maybe two VMs, and you're thinking, well, I can't be doing all this one by one. Let me just give this guy user access to everything. That is bad practice. Controlling the size of VM deployment. Like I said, it's easy to just build deployments in the cloud, VMs in the cloud. So maybe couple of guys are thinking, well, I like that 16 core, 16 gig memory kind of thing. Let me just build it as for dev, to test performance, and they leave it on. So that also ties down to rising Azure cost, because 16 core, 16 gig, that's a lot of money. Accidental deletion. Now, this one happened to an organization, I think about 8 months ago. So they had this new Azure administrator who, is willing to impress the boss, and they were trying to cut cost. And this notion, like, switch off a server for like 2 3 weeks, and if that server, if no one's using it, it's safe to delete. Uh, that does not help 100% of the time, because this guy, what he did was he deleted the root CA, which is always turned off for Azure certificate services. So that root CA is always turned off, and it's only brought back on when it needs to renew the certificate of the enterprise CA. So that was deleted, and the time they wanted to renew the certificate, the VM was gone. So luckily, they had a backup with a longer retention policy, so they were able to recover that. So, but that's another issue. Like, okay, why will you delete a production VM? But that's because there is no control in place for you to know that this is actually a very important VM. The other one, VM with public IPs. Development team think, okay, I want to be able to access this VM from home so I can continue my job. So what do? They just stick a public IP on the server, accessible everywhere. So these are some of the challenges in an Azure environment. And as you can see from this picture, you can see the solutions architect is already freaking out. He's thinking, God, I'm going to lose my job or go to jail. But how can this be controlled? This is where we've got Azure governance. So just to explain what Azure governance is in short details, what you want is, you want the right people deploying the right resources with the right configuration. that's it. Because now you've got speed, you've got the cloud. DevOps team or the development team can spin up resources and quickly. But how do you put all those controls in place to make sure that they're not just doing anything out of the controls or something that could come back and hurt the company? So in here, we're going to talk about policy-based management. So how do we put control in place? So, like the admin guy who kept a public IP on a VM, you want to stop that from happening if that ever occurs. Cost management, how do you know which resource is costing you a lot? How can you charge that back to a department? So we'll talk about tags in there. So with that, if you charge it to a department, you can do what they call like chargeback. So you can find out, oh, okay, it's your department that is spending so much of the company's resources. I hope you guys are bringing in more money than you're spending. Um, Resource visibility. You want to be able to look at the resource and say, well, that's what it does. It's a production resource. It belongs to this application owner. This is the service that is running through, and subscription governance. So these are just templates, which the more subscriptions you have in your environment, you can now just use the same template just across your environment. So you don't have to configure this manually on this subscription and think, oh, I have to do this again on another subscription. So that's what we're all going to talk about today, and also all the challenges that solutions architect was going through. So um, before we get into all the features of Azure governance, I'd like to start with the basics. So, which is what we call scope. So, what is scope? So, scope is like a level of hierarchy within that forms an Azure environment. So, let's start from the bottom here. From the bottom, we can see we've got our resources. So we've got the VMs, we've got the virtual networks, we've got your SQL database as a service. You've got all that. So right on top of that, you've got the resource group. So this resource group, think of them as like a container for your resources. And on top of the resource group, you've got the subscription. Now, some organizations, they've only got just one subscriptions, but most organizations, larger organizations, they've got more than one. Some 5, 20, 25. And so the subscription is just a logical container where you can provision all your resources. And from the subscription, we have the management group. So management group is just a way which allows you to group all your subscriptions. So this is just one example with one management group with 2 subscriptions, but it can scale out more than this. So I'll show you on the next slide. So here is an example of a company that's got like roughly 10 subscriptions, and they've decided to build multiple management group. Please note on your Azure environment, uh, you have a management group by default, which is called the root management group. Sometimes it's there by default, and sometimes you might have to just create it. So that comes in there by default, and then the other ones you can create in there. So you can see in here all the subscriptions has been filtered out into different management group. So just a quick example. So if I apply a policy to, let's say, human resources, what would happen is the policy will only affect the dev test subscription and not every other one. And the same way is if I apply it to the root management group, it's all going to cascade down to every resources in here. Now, I'll show you a demo very, very soon about management groups, where to create them, how to move subscriptions between management group. But let's talk about our back roles. So this is role-based access control. So this is predominantly what this does is it restricts what users can do within your Azure environment. It's used to segregate duties. So if you want a user to have full access or just read only, just add to your resources, this is where you can control that. And there are 3 scopes of 3 security. You need the security principle, you need the role definition, and the scope. So those are the 3 options you need in order to get this working. So let's start with the security principle. So security principle is like your user account. It could be a group, and could be a service principal or managed identity. Now, we won't talk about managed identity. I believe we've got another session on identity. I think uh, that might be discussed. But just in short, managed identities. With managed identities, you don't manage the credentials. You don't have access to it, but you can use this identity to authenticate to applications that are using Azure AD that supports Azure Active Directory authentication. But for this example, we'll just stick with users because it's straightforward. So we've got a user. So what is it I want the user to be able to do? Do you want him to have full access or just read only? So that's where you now define the role definition. So there are multiple roles: owner, contribution, readers. So let's say we decide, okay, I want this user to have a reader role. Fine, this user can have reader role. Okay, where do you want this user to have access? This is where we talked about scope from the first one. So we've got the management group. So now if I apply the scope down on the management group, what would happen is that policy cascade down to the subscription, also down to the resource group, and down to the resource. But if you don't want to do that, you can now do that on the resource group or directly on the resource. Best practice is just do it on the resource because you don't want people having too much access to what they don't have, what they don't need, because that sometimes could, you know, if I don't have access, I can get into trouble to something I don't have access to. So we'll do a little demo about that also. But before we get there, I need to explain because we are still there's still another session about Azure AD, and so it's just to explain the difference between the Azure Outback role and Azure AD role because sometimes it gets a bit confusing. So for the Azure AD role, that's just managing Azure AD objects. So while for the Outback role is used to just grant access to Azure resources, so your VMs, so your database, your virtual networks. And for Azure AD role, it can be scoped at the tenant level. It's just scoped at the tenant level, sorry. So if you grant someone access there, they've got access to AD depending on the roles that you've given. But the Outback role, just as I've just talked about, that can be scoped at multiple levels. So that can be from the management group, the subscription, the resource group, or directly at the resource itself. So, um, right. So these are some of the roles. These are predefined. You can create your own custom role within Outback roles, but these are some of the common ones. So we've got the owner. So the owner has full access, can do and also delegate rights to others. Contributor can do a lot, but can't grant access to users. Reader is just read only. And user access administrator can manage users into Azure resources. Now, this user access administrator, this also gets confusing with an Azure AD role, which is called the user administrator. So they are not the same. So, like we've seen here, the user access administrator only grants you the user access to the resources, while the user administrator, all that does is it manages the user account, the group, and maybe resetting the password because we've seen confusion on that before. So, right. So I've been speaking a lot. Let's go into a couple of demos. So, first things first, let's go into. So this is my environment. So I'm already logged in as Taiwo Koka. As you can see, I've got access to a whole lot of resources. So that's because in here, my subscription is tied as the owner. But first of all, we talked about management groups. So let's look at management groups. So the easiest way is to just go into the search bar when you log into portal.azure.com and just type in management, and you'll find management group here. So we click on management groups, and you can see I've already created a couple under here. But you can see in here, this is the tenant root group. So this is the one that you have by default. Sometimes it's there by default, or sometimes you have to create it. And you only click a button and that shows up. But I've created this IT department, and as you can see, this IT department also has one under, which is the marketing department. But also, please note at the tenant root, you can see I've got 3 subscriptions. But under the IT department, I've got 2. So if you want to create a new management group, it's just simple as clicking add. Let's call it Azure Nigeria MG, and I'll just give it that. Azure MG. So once I click submit, it's going to create that.
So, Mr.
So
Taiwo, apologies for interrupting.
yes.
So, I believe that some of the audience said it'll be useful if you can if you can zoom out, or if you can zoom in, so they
Oh
can
yeah.
see the screen much more closely.
All right. Yep. Is this better?
Yeah. So hopefully
Let's
that'll
see.
be better for people. Yeah, I think that'll be good. Yeah. Thanks very
Okay.
much. Yeah.
Yep, not a problem at all. So let me go back. So at the moment, I'm already creating a resource group. So I'll just go back just in case anyone has missed a couple of things. So we go back into homes. So to get to the management group, all we have to do is just click and search for management, and you can find the management group here. So while that was going on, I already created an Azure management group, and you can see it here. So this is just under the tenant root here, and you see it's got no subscription. So if I decide, okay, this Azure management group needs to be nested under another management group, is as simple as me clicking move, select which management group I need to put it on, and just select save. And that's it. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, you can nest management groups up to 6 levels deep. So that is as far as that you can nest all this management group. So now I've just created Azure Nigeria MG, which is under Azure, under HR department, but we've got no subscription. I can easily come in here, select one of my subscription and just click move and ask which management group, select and save. And that is how you move your management groups around. So that is all with management groups. The next one now is the outback role. So remember I said outback role can be done from the management group, the subscription level, the resource group, and directly from the resource. So right now, let's pick the IT department. So if I select that, you can see under the access control, and if you select role assignment, you'll see all the recent who has access to my management group. So you can see we've got Bosse Ayodele, we've got Taiwo Koka, and it's also, please note, like this access was granted to this from this resource. So there are other things that you need to find out. This was inherited from the management group on above it, while this was granted directly here. So, for example, let's say I want to grant a user access I want to grant a user access. Let's say owner access. All I need to do is click on Add Role Assignment. Remember, well, we said we could pick whichever one. So let's click Owner. So I'm granting this user owner access. So now who am I going to add? So let's add, I've got someone called Kevin Durant. I've got Kevin Durant there. So once I click save, Kevin Durant becomes an owner in here. So that's it. So the IT department has, okay, so this IT department is not, okay, it's not got any subscription. Let's go into marketing, the marketing management group, so we can see how that works. So that is HR, IT, marketing department. So if we go into the access control this time, let's look at the role assignment. Oh, sorry. Yep. So that was fine. So what has happened is Kevin Durant had access from here. And because the marketing department is also under the IT department, automatically he gains access also. So if we look at the role assignment, You can see Kevin Durant here. We can now go into the two subscriptions, and that should have just gone down. Role assignment, and we can see Kevin Durant here. So this is how you assign roles at the management group. But this is not something that you do regularly during when you're at work. So let's look at another example. So we've got someone else in here, and his name is Michael Jordan. Yep. So let's see. So now we've got Michael Jordan here. He is logged on to portal.azure.com, and if you look at the virtual machines here, and just to be sure that everything is there, I'll select all, click on apply. We can see Michael Jordan has access to only test VM. So let's say Michael Jordan comes up and say, okay, guys, I need access to SCCM, the SCCM server. I need to be able to turn it off and off. So what we'll do now, some organizations might say, okay, just give him at the subscription level, which is clearly not the best practice. What we'll do is we'll go directly to the VM and just click the SCCM app. Access control is the same thing. It's just straightforward, and click add a role assignment. So just for him to power on and off, we don't want to give Michael Jordan owner role because that's too much. Since he needs just the VM just to be able to power on and off, we give him virtual machine contributor, and we now look for his name and Michael Jordan, and we'll click save. So what would happen here? So now you can see this is from my own account because I'm the owner and I've got like the God mode on this environment. So now all we need to do is we'll wait just for a few minutes, and once we refresh, that server will show up here. But as you can see, Michael Jordan already has access to test VM. So if we have a look at the environment again, select test VM, look at the access and the role assignment, we should find Michael Jordan somewhere here. You can see he already has access to this. And now all we need to do is wait, and hopefully the demo gods should be favorable with us. Let's just click refresh and click all, apply. And we just need to wait for a few minutes. Sometimes this takes a minute or two, and we might just need to wait a bit, and that should show up. Oh, apply. I'm hoping the demo gods are not angry with me, but let's have a look just to make sure we are all right. So we look at the access control in here, look at the role assignments, scroll down. Michael Jordan has virtual machine contributor. So definitely that should show up anytime soon. Aha, you can see. So now it's there. So Michael Jordan only has access to just two VMs, not everything. He only has access to what he needs to work on. So that is how the RBAC rule works. Um, let's go back to the slide because I think I've already spoken too much. Ah, da, da, da. So we've talked about this. So let's move into resource tags. So I'm just going to quickly go through the slides and we'll quickly go into demo. So resource tags, these are ways you can use to identify resources on your networks. And they come in name and value pair. So let's say, for example, let's look at the one here. So I've got the name for owner. So who is the owner of these resources? You type in there, it's Joe. Which department is Joe in? Marketing. So every organization can have their own taxonomy on how they want these tags to be used. So we've got environment, we've got environment. So is it a production environment or is it a dev environment? Uh, Things like that. So I'll show you a demo on that. And let's go into cost management because I want to show both of them at the same time. So cost management, this is where you will have a look at how you're spending your money, what's eating up all your money and everything. So in here you can see from the slides here, you can see virtual machines and from the location of which how much each location is costing you. And now if you've got tags on your VMs, it's easy to now find out which department is actually spending a lot. So let's now go back into the labs and show you quickly how that works. So let's look at this test VM now. Is it tagged? In order to look at the tags, you can just select tags in here. So this is not tagged. So we can just add tags, and it's as simple as just clicking here. If you've got tags previously, if you've created tags previously, this will show up. So we've got name, so I can give it a name. I can say this is dev test or something. So let me just give it a name. So that would automatically be assigned to it. So yep, and we go into this, and if we select which environment, so which environment do we want? You can see I've used production and I've used test. Now, if I don't want to use production, I don't want to use test, I could just type in development and just accept that. And we can look at which department. I can type in department. I select department and I click the drop down here. I've used IT and networks. If I want to use network, I'll just click this and click apply. So this is how it's very, very useful tags to identify resources. So not only, we can also add what they call the application owner. So if I want the application owner to be, I don't know, Steph Curry. So I've got this. So these are some of the owners that I've kept the tags in. I can just select that and click apply. So this is how useful it is. Before we go into cost management, let me just show you how you can use those tags. So if you go back home and let's say you search for virtual machines, you've got all these virtual machines in the environment, but you can always add a filter here and just select what type of filter you want. You can select tags and you can see I can select application owner. So what's the value? It should show me all the ones available. If I want to check, okay, which one is Steph Curry managing? I just click on apply. You can see all the VM that is being done by, managed by Steph Curry. And that the same can be done for departments. I want to see which one is managed by IT or which one is managed by networks. So you can see that is how you can easily group and say, okay, this server, this is managed by the IT department, this server is managed by networks. What about cost management, which we already talked about? So we can go in here. So I love using this search button. So all I can just do is just search and just select cost management. So this is my environment. So all I need to do is select cost management in here and click on cost analysis. So this will show you how much I've spent this month. So this is scoped to the root management group. I can change the scope if I want, but we're not going to do that in here. So now we can see I've actually spent £57 so far. Um, but if you want to check which resources is eating up most of the money, you can just click on the filter here and click cost by resources, and that would filter down. So this is just for the month of May, and you can see the specific resource which is actually costing you more money. And let's wait for it to filter quickly, and this should be ready anytime soon. And it's a bit slow today. Hello. This is taking time, but this is just a way you can view all the resources. I'm just going to, well, while that's still loading, let me show you how also you can filter it down to the department. So in order to filter by department, you could just, all you have to do is simple. If you've used tags on your department or your resources, just click on filter, scroll down, select tags. So it's going to ask you which of the tags are you interested in. So these are all the tags I've used. I'll select department. And if I click on IT and click OK, so this will show me how much the IT department has been spending. But this is not showing. Uh, let's refresh. Let's go back to cost analysis. Because sometimes this just does not work. As then we go back to cost by resources. Let's see. This is taking time. I'm not sure why it's taking time. Oh, finally, hallelujah! So now we can see all the resources that are eating so much of my money. We can see that this is the OS disk, and you can see it's got all the tags in there. So if you're interested in which resources is costing you a lot, you can use grow or cost by resources. But if you're interested in which department, tags are always the best way. So you can just click add, um, filter by the tags. If you want to use application owner, you can also use application owner to say, okay, let's use uh, Kevin Durant. Let's see if we'll have any. I don't think we'll have any, but it's just a nice way to say, okay, right, okay, the application owner, you guys are costing us a lot of money. I hope you guys are bringing money in, or we'll have to slash what you're doing. But if some, if a department, so you can see at the moment, oh, okay, so Kevin Durant just costing us pennies. So, we'll leave Kevin Durant alone. So for budget, another thing is I want to talk about budget. So let's say, for example, there is an IT department or department that is costing you a lot of money. You want to keep an eye on that. It's simple. You can just use budget in here. So I'll just show you an example of how to create a budget. You just click on add. At the moment, I'm scoping it to the root because I want to use all my 3 subscriptions. I'm scoping it against all my 3 subscriptions and any future subscription I add. So here I can add a filter and I can just say, well, if the tag is equals to, so I'm interested in the IT department. I can just select IT, give it a name, so let's say IT budget. I want it monthly, and this is the budget. I want them to have £100, let's say for a month. But I can also raise a threshold to say, well, if the percentage of their budget, if it reaches 80% of the budget, which is like £80, send me an alert. So I can create a budget this way. I can just say, okay, send it to Tyro and just click delete. You need to just oh, just delete, and just click create. And that is it. And that would set a budget. So anytime they reach the threshold of 80%, or you get an alert. So you can always go to the IT department and say, come, you guys are starting to cost us a lot of money. You guys should sort yourself out. So that is that with cost management and resource tags. There's one other thing I need to talk about, which is resource lock. So I'll show you a demo quickly. So remember the story I told you about the guy who deleted the root CA because he didn't know what he was doing and he thought um, it's not an important VM. So you can put a resource lock on your VM. So I'll just show you a demo on that. So here is a test VM. In order to put a resource lock, it's as simple of just scrolling down and looking for locks, which should be here. Yeah. So there are 2 types of resource lock. We've got the do not delete and read only. Microsoft has changed it to delete. So usually it used to be called do not delete. So if I put this do not, this lock type delete, I can give it a name and just say do not delete and click OK. So let's say overview, and I say, okay, I want to delete this VM. You can see fail to delete the virtual machine because it is locked. So locks are also a good way which you can use to prevent accidental deletion, or if someone wants to delete a VM and sees there's a lock on it, they can always think twice to say, oh, okay, why is there a lock on it? So these are some of the features that we're going to that are very, very useful in helping you ensure that all your VMs, the right resources are not deleted. So let me go into the slide back. So now we'll go into Azure Policies, and I'll go through the slides quickly because we've got Azure Policies and Azure Blueprint that we need to talk about. So like I said, remember the development guys who were building 16 cores, 16 gig VMs, and they're like, yeah, you guys can't stop me. I build whatever I want, and you can't stop me, even though you've won them. How can you enforce that? You can use Azure Policy. So Azure Policy is just a way to control what users can do. Like I said, you want the right people to create the right resources using the right configuration. So what Azure Policy does is you put a certain set of policies. So there is a policy definition and there is the initiative definition. So a policy definition is just one policy. So for example, let's say I want to restrict the type of resource that you can create. I can do that in there. I want to ensure that every resource you're creating only can be only within the UK. I don't want you building resources in the US. This can be done through Azure Policy, or you want to make sure that some things are in place. So, like every VM that is created needs to be backed up, or you want the anti-malware installed automatically on it. So this can also check that for you. So the advantage of it is, it enforce policies, and if there is an issue, it can remediate. So it can remediate all policies. So, for example, let's say you want a certain VM skill. So you want A plus VMs only to be assigned. And there is an existing, let's say someone has already used the D series VMs, you wouldn't expect the policy to kind of like just resize the VMs, because you still need to just investigate to find out what's going on. Why was it deployed that way? So like I said, so there is a policy definition and initiative definition. So policy definition is just one policy, and while the initiative definition is a collection of policies. So let's go into a demo and we'll see how that works. So I'll go back to my home as usual. I hope you all can see. Let me make it bigger. And same, go to the search and just search for policy. And we can find the policy in here. So now what we'll do is we'll try and create a definition policy. So we just click on definition. I want policies. I'll show you the difference between both. So let's start with the initiative one and location. Now this is like scope. Now this also, you need to be careful where you put this definition, because if you put it at the bottom here, it will only be available to the subscriptions within IT department. If you put it within HR, it's only going to be available within the subscriptions within the management group. But for this, I always prefer to put it at the root, so it should always be available to the rest of the subscriptions. So I'll select one. I'll just say test definition Azure Nigeria. So let's select an existing one. So let's just call it tags just to make it, and we click next. So now it's asking you add a policy definition. So this is where, let it load up, and you can see I can add anything I want. So let's say I'm interested in tags. Let's say tags. So you can see in here, I can select what is it? Do I want to require a tag and value on these resources? I can select that. If I want to configure backups without a given tag. So there are so many. So let's look at the example where public IP address. Let's look public IP. So you can see in here, network interface should not have public IP. So if I want to stop, that administrator that likes to put public IP addresses on VMs, I can select this policy and just click add, click next, 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 review and create. So this will now create that test definition. So now I call that test definition. Now remember, I only added one policy in there. Now I can go back in there and say, oh, I forgot one, and just click edit, go into policy, add another definition and say, okay, let's say I want tags. I need you to require tags on resources, right? Let me click add. So this is how you build or your initiative definitions. You can add multiple, you can click and search whatever you want that fits what you're trying to achieve. You can click configure backups on machines. So we just click and save, and that should save. If we go back in there, let's wait for it to save. I don't think I saved that, but yep, but that's fine. We still got network interface and I have a public IP. So how do you assign this? And it's as simple as just clicking on assign. So now it's going to ask you, where do you want to assign it? At the tenant root, which is fine. But if you want to exclude a subscription or a resource group, you can easily do that here. So if I want to exclude this one, Microsoft Visual Studio, I can just select that. This, uh, yes. So that's been excluded. I can click on review and create. Now it's created it, but now if you look at it now, this policy will take around 30 minutes to take effect, but we don't have 30 minutes. So what I would like to do is, I've already created a policy previously, so which is called restrict VM size. So let's have a look at this restrict VM size. We can see it's assigned to Visual Studio Enterprise NPN. Let's see what's in there and then we'll test it out. So now I can click view definition, and you can see allowed locations and allowed virtual machine SKU. So let's look at this one, virtual machine size SKU. And oh, let's go back. I went into the wrong one. So I'll just click edit initiatives, go into the policy. And if you scroll down to the policy parameters in here, you can see I've already selected the SKUs that I want. So I want only the basic standard ones. And also the allowed location, I've already selected a few, which is the UK West and South. So let's try this out. And this is, please have a look and see, this restrict VM size is assigned to this subscription only. So let's go to that subscription. I'll go into VM. I'll click on add virtual machine. And let's change this to NPN. So I'll create a new resource group called Azure Nigeria resource group. So that's fine. There is none. I'll just call this Azure Nigeria. We'll leave it at UK West because once to leave it, the application developer is happy with UK West. But let's have a look at the size. So let's say, no, let's pick UK South because I think UK West there it's always having some issues. So if you have a look now, I've selected the D series here, right? Let me just give it an account. Give it in an account. Let's see, we're creating a new network. Everything is fine. Let's click on review and create. So what would happen is it's running a final validation, but you can see immediately the validation has failed in here. And if you find out, well, why did the validation fail? You can see the resource Nigeria VM is not is disallowed by policy, and the initiative is restrict VM size. Now, in this case, the guy who is trying to build the VM is now panicking, like, oh, why can't I build the VM? Oh, there's a problem with Azure. But if you look at the error code, if you look at the raw error code, and if we scroll down, we can see this is what we selected the D series in here, but these are the available ones that we can use. So anytime you have this type of issue and someone saying, oh, Azure is broken, you can just tell them this is the reason. You have to use any one of these skills, and this is disallowed. So if we go back, so maybe the guy is grumbling, oh, okay, I have to use the standard skill, and he goes back and selects, let's select our size. So we were looking at the A series. So it's going to complain like, oh, I'm using just 1 core and 2 gig RAM, but it is the policy. And if you click on review and create, You can see validation passed. But remember, there were two policies. One was UK and one was the site. So let's say he decides to be cheeky and think, oh, you know what? I think I like East US. Let me just keep it on East US. We run validation, validation failed. And if you select why it failed, let's wait for it to finish. And you can see policy allowed locations. And if you go into the raw error code, and if we should be able to see that, that should be somewhere. I think I've passed it. Oh, yeah. So you can see we decided to use the expression East US, but we already told him, well, you can only use UK, UK South, or UK West. So this is how you control it. So you ensure that people can deploy their resources pretty fast, but they just have to stay within the guardrails. So if I click UK South, review and create, validation passed. And now whoever is trying to deploy the application should be happy, and that would create automatically. So we've talked about Azure Policy now. So the last one that we need to talk about is Azure Blueprint. So Blueprint is another feature which Microsoft has it's currently showing as preview, but it allows you to package all these policies together, and you can now deploy it to multiple subscriptions at a go. So let me just quickly show you what you have with Blueprint, because we're running out of time. Let's look at Blueprint. This is Azure Blueprint. So with the Blueprint, what happens is it's got Azure Policy inside, it's got our back rows. So let's say there's a new subscription coming in and you want certain people to be the administrators of that group, of that subscription, or you want them to be the owner of the subscription. So rather than you going in and start typing, oh, I want this you want to grant it at the subscription level, you can do it from the Blueprint level. Um, Another option is if you want certain resources to be created within every subscription. So let's say you want a certain resource group to be created, you can use that within Azure Blueprint. So I will show you a quick demo. And now we can use the predefined samples in here, but let's pick one. Let's just pick one. Let's pick this ISO 27001 just to show you what's inside. So we can give it a name. I just call it Tarot Test 123. Location, I always prefer to put it at the root level so all other subscriptions can have it. So now, if you look at the artifacts in here, you can see all of them are all policy assignments. So we've got Azure Policy, right? Blueprint just gives you much more than just Azure Policy. You can now use Azure Policy. You can use Outback Row. You can create a resource group. So in here, we've got policies. But if I need to add more, I can just click Add an Artifact. Let's say if I want to add another policy assignment, I could just type in policies. You can see policy definitions here that just each one, but I'm interested in the initiative one. Oh, remember the restrict VM size one that we used previously? We can add it to this blueprint and just click restrict VM size. So that's in there. Also, we can also add a role assignment. So let's say I want certain users to have certain role within this, any subscription. I can click role. So let's say Kevin Durant, or let's see, let's try if Kevin, no, not Kevin, let's try Draymond. I think I have Draymond in there. Oh, no, I don't have Draymond. So we don't have a choice. Let's use Kevin Durant. So, yeah. So if I want Kevin Durant to be a owner, just select that and add. So this is how you build. So this is how you kind of like build the whole environment. So let's say I want to add like I want a particular resource group to be created in every subscription that I have. Just click on resource group. You can set this value now. I like to set the value now, so I can call it test resource group. And I want it in UK South. So UK South. Now, if I can find UK South, so that's UK South, you can click add, and that is it. You can add more. So there are four types that you can add. Just to explain, you've got the policy assignment, you've got the RBAC role, you've got the Azure resource template, and you've got the owner. So you can grant, oh, sorry, you've got the RM template, you've got the roles, and you've got the resource group. Sorry. So the policy is the one we've talked about. We've already showed you a demo on that. Role assignment, who needs access to this subscription or this resource group within this management group or within a resource. Template. Now this is like infrastructure as a code. So this Azure Resource Management Manager template can also build up policies, but it's not natively within Azure. You have to store it in a location, and then if you want to use the ARM template, that's fine. But I just think the Blueprint and the Azure Policy can do a lot together. So that is all. So once you save this as a draft, once you save it, the first thing you need to do is it's saved as a draft. And if you go into the Blueprint definition, this is the one we've created. I created one recently, just yesterday. So you can see it's just in a draft form. So now you can now publish it, give it a version number. Just give it version 1 and click publish. So what would happen is that would deploy to all the tenant routes in here, and it takes its own time. But let's look at the one I created previously. It's just a simple one. So you can see all I've done is for every subscription, create a resource group and add BB as the owner. But let's click on Edit Blueprint, look at the artifact. And if you click on Create Resource Group, what I've asked it to do, if it loads up, is it creates a resource group called Azure Nigeria. And we just have to look at that to see if that's worked. And I believe that has done. So this was deployed to, if you go into the assigned blueprint MSDN platform, but let's just look at resource group. And if I search for that, yep, so I was testing it with another subscription before. But if you look at this as your resource group, access control, look at the role assignment, and as you can see, BB also is also owner of this resource. So this was definitely coming from the blueprint. So just to round up, because I think I've taken so much. So just to show you, remember the challenges that solutions architect was having. So lack of visibility into your environment, you use tags. So rising Azure cost, you use tags so just to identify who is using what, and use cost management to have a look at which resource is being used. The resources deployed to the wrong region, GDPR, we don't want that. Azure Policy can sort that for you. Controlling who has access to a VM, our back rows can do that. The size of a VM, Azure Policies, accidental deletion, resource lock, and tagging. Because if you look at it, you can see, okay, this resource belongs to a production environment. You can't just delete it like that. So the VM with the public IP address, you can use Azure Policy also to block that. And as you can see, the solution architect is happy. He's just chilling, having a holiday and just working from home. No, not from home, from the beach. So that is all. Just going to ask if anyone has any question.
Wow, wow, wow. That was awesome. That was absolutely awesome. Simple, straight to the point, very, very clear. We have a lot of people just saying thank you to you in the chat window. So we have a few people saying. So Michael said, as simple as tagging is, it's crazy. I'm just understanding it. So
Oh, cool.
thanks very much. Thanks very much. I really appreciate that. And also, yeah, so we have Big Two, Sakofi himself, the gold man, saying awesome. And there's a lot of notes that I took already. So thanks very much for taking the time to share this. Just one final question for this. So, in terms of a new administrator managing an Azure environment, any initial policies that you recommend that you say make sure you start out with these policies to begin with? So, what are the like some of the top maybe top two policies that you say do this very quickly?
The first one is tagging. You need to tag your environment so you know who is using what and who it belongs to. Tagging is the first one. The other one I could also recommend is resource lock, and as well, I would say Azure Policy. You have to look at your environment. If you're a one-man show, then that's fine. You can just use tagging. But if you've got so many people just within your Azure environment, tagging is number one, and I would say RBAC and Azure Policy. I can't really say the top two. I would say the top three is the RBAC and the Azure Policy, because the Azure Policy will definitely protect you from threats. So you remember the guy who has the public IP on the on an environment. If that's really like a security issue, so I will recommend tagging RBAC and Azure Policy.
Yeah, and again, just a lot of thanks still coming in. So Promise says, I enjoyed your lecture, Taiwo. So Okoyemi says, thanks. So Michael says, this is an awesome session. So again, I know you have your dad's birthday. So happy birthday to dad. Have an amazing celebration with him and the rest of the family. And again, thanks very much for doing this session with us. So ladies and gentlemen, so later today we have a session on Azure DevOps by Raphael Gabmama, where we're going to be looking at Introduction to Infrastructure as Code. But thanks very much for joining us and have a lovely evening. Thanks very much, Mr. Taiwo, for the session.
No
See
problem.
you later.
Thank you, everyone. Yep.
Cheers.
Yep.
Bye.